Welcome back to a multi-part series of videos talking about how porn influences the brain. In this second part, we'll go ahead and talk about different clinical cases that talks about how the Coolidge Effect really influences as well as other mammals in the mammalian kingdom. If you haven't already, go ahead and check out the first part. If you've seen this already, go ahead and check out the third part and the other series that talks about how porn influences the brain. Let's get into it.
It takes advantage of an old program located in your primitive brain. The subconscious program is what got you started down the path of using porn. Consider this experiment. It's been done many times. I guess scientists have nothing better to do. What happens when you drop a male rat into a cage with a receptive female? Well, first, you see a frenzy of copulation. Progressively, the male tires of female number one. She wants more, but he's had enough. He just can't get excited anymore. So what do? Well, replace the original female with a fresh one. And the male revives and gallantly struggles to fertilize her. He keeps on going. Then, the same things happen. The male loses interest in female number two. Starting to see a pattern here. This process can be repeated again and again, but with novel partners. This can be repeated until the male nearly dies of exhaustion. See, this is a genetic program. This has nothing to do with your genitals. It's all happening in the brain. And the purpose of it is to make more babies. But even more importantly, it's to increase the genetic variety of the male's offspring.
This is a really great clinical study that shows the example about how our reward system and our limbic system works. It's similar across all mammals, which is the reason why we use lab rats so often in clinical studies. And for me, when I saw this part of the animation, I could not help but really think about how our brain's programming, different old parts of it, is not able to keep up with the different demands and different changes of today. Like, for instance, we can easily hop on Netflix now and gain the experience, the emotions, the thought, the information, and the wisdom that would normally take many years or many decades or even very critical, dangerous situations to gain in the real world. But we gain it just by watching an hour-and-a-half movie. So if you watch a war film, to be able to go through an experience like that through war and to see the strife, the struggle, the difficult decision, the tactile moves and the strategy, that would take a lot of effort and you may not live past the war. But in an hour and a half, in an hour 40 minutes, you've gained a lot of that experience and a lot of that life just by watching the movie. And that's through technology. All that content that's been concentrated down, now you possess that with a very short period of time. The same thing for this information. Going through my grad program, I've taken a lot of refined information from my professors who, through their training, they've gotten through studies, and through those studies has been based on thousands of participants through study, through rigor, through proving and disproving. That's been concentrated to them, which me going through the program has been concentrated down to myself. And now I'm concentrating it along with this animation and the information and putting it in a very digestible way to give to you. Versus if you spent many years or decades, you may not even have a fraction of what you've learned just by clicking and watching these short videos. And so how does this relate to what we're talking about for pornography? Well, it relates in the same way that by a simple click, we've bypassed what it naturally would take in order to gain that experience, to be validated, or to feel and experience that much sex. With a couple clicks, you can see hundreds, thousands, and millions of women, and your biology doesn't know the difference. It thinks that you've made it, but you haven't gone through any of the effort. You haven't done anything to earn that, but your brain thinks that you're winning massively. And so it bypasses any type of work, any type of experience that you need to gain in order to have that. You go straight towards the reward.
If you think about heavy porn users, they often need more novelty, just like these animals, to get excited. Here's what's going on with the animals. It's called the Coolidge Effect. It starts out with declining interest in the present sexual partner, then renewed vigor in a novel sexual partner. This is present in all mammals, and it's also present in females, and of course, we said it's here for genetic variety of the offspring. This is what you started down the road to getting hooked on porn. You see, with porn, you're like a lab rat. Your primitive brain urges you to fertilize the two-dimensional females, or whatever is on your screen. So you're happily married and partnered up. You'd say, no, I'm never going to cheat. Well, either way, the Coolidge Effect is still at work in your brain. The more rational parts of your brain are saying, no, I'm not going to cheat. But the primitive parts of your brain are saying, whoa, look at that. Or maybe fantasizing what would be like to have sex, or maybe you're using porn. This is a subtle reminder of the deep programming of your brain, the Coolidge Effect, that's there to spread your genes far and wide.
Yeah, this is something extremely important to know, right? As we spoke about before, how our limbic system and how our reward circuits is meant to pick up novelty, something that is new and different. And the reason that this was really valuable for us before and our brain made it a program and all of us have it is that it's really important because it kept us alive, right? For instance, if there's a situation that happens and you got an unproportionately high amount of reward for it, for instance, like, you discover food for the first, or a certain type of meat or food for the first time, like bone marrow, and you're picking it out and you eat it and you're like, oh, like I didn't know this was edible. It tastes good. Wow, it has a lot of calories, it has a lot of fats. It sends a tremendous amount of dopamine in your brain as well as serotonin so that it creates a very strong positive association for that opportunity. It connects it so that you remember, this is good, bone marrow good. Next time, crack the bone, crack it open, eat the stuff that's on the inside. That's good. It was unexpectedly more rewarding than you thought. So this is how you learn and how your brain seeks and finds opportunities that keeps you alive. In the case of porn, it's a misuse of your programming, and it's making the association that whenever we use PM or O, porn, masturbation, or orgasm, we're having these floods of neurochemicals that create a bond saying that we're winning, that this situation is very valuable to us, it's going to help keep us alive, and it's going to help us further our survivability, when in reality, it's not able to understand that this is not a win. This is a computer screen. And I basically just made myself connected to this situation, and by the end of it, nothing has furthered my chances of survival or procreation at all. Versus in the real world, which is how our brain is developed, and in that environment, it's a massive win, showing that we're spreading our genetics far and wide. To increase the chance of our genetics being passed down to the next generation, the Coolidge Effect, a part of our brain, wants to procreate with as many females as possible, which is why we can have sex more often. When a female, once she gets pregnant, it takes a 9-month term. But us, we can go ahead and trying to procreate with other females. And this increases the chance that our genetics will move on to the next generation.
Here's an interesting graph, which happens to be about rams. As we can see, we have female presentation at the bottom. We have time to ejaculation in minutes on the left side, and we have a male. In one experiment, the male had the same female over and over again, and in another experiment, he had different females. How long did it take him to ejaculate? Well, if you look at the same female, he got longer and longer until finally, I guess, when they stopped the experiment, it took 18 minutes. Now, a ram only lives 12 years, so 18 minutes is like 2 hours in our time, so it's quite a bit of time. And of course, with different females, he ejaculated quite quickly, which, of course, means he was very, very excited.
This study just confirms the commonality which we share with mammals across the entire mammalian kingdom, right? This part of our brain, the limbic system, as well as the reward circuits, that says, yes, spread your genes as far as possible, as diversely as possible. We want to make sure that our genetics is out there. Especially as a male, we don't know if it's ours for sure. So we want as many shots as possible. Plus, we want as much diversity as possible to make sure that the genes mutate and it has survivability if there were any types of plagues or different types of mutations that took out a certain type of genes that were too similar. So the diversity as well as the quantity is extremely important. This was a really big problem that I saw a lot when I was working with couples in counseling. Right? Like, for instance, the men, they wouldn't understand this part of themselves, the way that the brain works. And if you think about it, it's kind of like a cell phone, right? It's an old program that runs them underneath. And when they get into a committed relationship, logically, their new software and their intentions, yes, I love this woman. I'm so committed. I've never looked at another woman. I have no intentions or anything like this. I'm going to be with her for a long time. But they don't know that there's older software which they haven't dealt with. They haven't really updated that part of themselves, just like a phone, right? It's prone to error. It's prone to glitches because they haven't modernized itself. They haven't gotten a software update, and they need to do it by watching videos like this, by educating themselves on porn, by educating themselves on neurobiology and psychology, so they can update their operating system so the way that they operate is a much better way to connect with systems, with relationships, with life, with pornography, or rather not use pornography, right? So it's super important. And I don't see as many men doing the type of things that's needed in order to familiarize themselves and update the way that their own brain actually works. I hope the second part was helpful for you in understanding how porn influenced the brain. We're going to move on to the third part, which gets into more detail about the reward system as well as the limbic system in relation to porn.